got a brand new spirit, speaking and it's done. Woke up on the side of the bed like I won. Talk like the wind in my chest to that sun. G5 in the US to Taiwan. Now who can say that? I wanna play back. Mama knew I was a needle in a haystack. I'm a body boy, plus way back. I got a feeling
This is awesome. You're awesome, dude. I love your energy, man. You know, I don't even know your language, but I don't need to. I think somebody talked about that this morning. I went to dinner last night at Estella's. I was invited, and I'm so thankful. And I was listening to the speakers, to their passion, their energy, their enthusiasm. And I got emotional, and I couldn't even pick up a word. I've always wondered what it would be like to come out onto a stage with this many people having no clue what I was going to talk about. And now we're about to find out. But I stand here today more inspired than I've ever been. I stand here today with more passion than I came with. More belief than I came here with. More energy, more enthusiasm, more confidence. And I thank you for that. I stand here missing the kickoff to the Super Bowl. But I wouldn't have it any other way, because watching the Super Bowl for myself just makes me happy and just turns me on. But being here, being asked and having the honor and the privilege to speak before this group, I have the opportunity to change ultimately millions of lives. And I'm thankful to Estella and Liz for this opportunity. Why would we sit and watch other people live out their dreams and by watching a Super Bowl when we can go live out our dreams? And I stand here today draped and drenched, and I am Zango. I love this stuff. You don't even know what it is yet, but you will one day. Don't come close to me. You might get more confident. You might get more passionate. You might even get more enthusiastic and have more belief, if you can imagine. I was asking somebody this morning, as I was pouring a Limitless into my drink, if Limitless is here. And now after watching your energy and so forth, I understand why the founders haven't brought that product to Mexico yet. Whoa, that would be crazy. At the risk of sounding like I was asked to come up here to edify Liz and Estella Salinas, I have to tell you that they are some of the best leaders in the world. I was blessed in this industry to have great mentorship. Great mentorship is my immediate upline with my mom. Great mentorship with her sponsor and her cousin, Bob Schmidt, who is one of the industry's greatest. And I've heard many successful network marketers say that Bob Schmidt is one of the top 3 network marketers in the world. If Bob Schmidt was one of the top 3 network marketers in the world, then so is Estella Salinas. I sat last night with her sister Liz and listened to Liz tell my mom that Estella is such a blessing as a sister, how great of a sister she is. I've listened to people edify her from halfway around the world. I've listened to the people in her own backyard or rooftop edify her. Man, do you know what you have? Do you know what you have? If Estella says jump, I say how high. Really. She's changing lives, and she's leading leaders I've watched you folks the last few days, these people in the front rows and many others, the people that have given us their time, and I see so much leadership, and I really learn what it really is to be a leader even more, because that's what leaders do, is they develop leaders. And I have some news for you. Well, good for Estella. See, 9 years ago when I was introduced to this industry and this company, that was kind of my attitude. Well, good for you. Good for him. Good for her. What does that mean to me? And that's the objective of this meeting. That's the objective of Estella's system, is what's in it for you. And it's okay. But I have news for you. Do you think that having beautiful homes like Estella and Liz live in, and boy, is that a beautiful home. Do you think that driving nice cars and having freedom and being able to spend all the time that you want with your spouse and with your children and with your grandchildren and having views like Estella's home has and having investments that can also set you free, do you think that that's just reserved for people like Estella? It's not. And that's what I love about Zango. Is Zango allows us to dream and allows the same opportunity for all of us. And do you think Estella's going to be mad if you pass her up in her earnings? No, she's going to help you do it for free. Do you understand? I can't even articulate. I prayed before this presentation to just give me the words to instill the confidence in one person in this room today so that they realize what you have a hold of and what it really can mean for you. I was introduced to this business from my mom almost 10 years ago, March of 2003. She came to my house. Man, there was a bottle of Zango up here, but she set this bottle on my kitchen island with so much confidence. There it is. And unfortunately, at that time of my life, all I saw was a bottle of juice. And see, we've all have dreams inside of us. We all have desires. We all have had dreams since our childhood of what we would become one day and what we were going to do with our lives. See, I've heard hell defined as lying on your deathbed, looking back at what you could have done with your life. What you could have done with your one and only life. And when I heard that definition, I was driving home from the seminar, and I was thinking, that does sound like hell to me. I don't like the way that sounds. But I also realized for the previous years leading up to that time in my life that I stopped dreaming like I used to dream. I don't know. Have you given up on your dream? Some of us maybe we have temporarily. I don't know where you're at when you give up on your dream. Some people might be at the swing set. In the swing set when they're in elementary school, swinging, stop dreaming. Some might be in their teens, might be driving down the road and realize that they don't dream like they used to dream. Some people might be into their 20s and their 30s when they realize they don't dream anymore. I was about 28 years old, and I remember driving down the road thinking, this must be what life is really like for everybody, except the chosen few. I've always been a big dreamer. But I stopped dreaming like I did when I was growing up. See, I always knew I was going to have success. And whatever that's a broad term. What does success mean to you? I don't know. I always knew I was going to have freedom, time freedom, geographic freedom, personal freedom, life. I was going to choose to live life by my terms, not the system. And I stopped dreaming like that, and it scared me. And for about 2 years, I used to beat myself up a lot, and I thought, is it just the chosen few that get to live life like Estella and Liz Salinas? Are private islands and trips to Bora Bora with your entire family for weeks on end, is that reserved for people like Brad Pitt? And so, am I just like everybody else? Am I just average? I was doing a meeting with somebody a couple of years ago, and the gentleman on the phone said to me, he said, well, good for you, Tommy. After I told him my story, he said, good for you. That's great that you have had this success with this business. He said, but what does the average person do? And I'd never been asked that question. I paused for a moment and I reflected. And I thought, well, what does the average person do at anything? What's average in school? A C? Well, I don't want my kids to get average grades. What does the average person do that starts a diet? Quits? Fails? What does the average person do that enrolls for a gym membership do? Quits? What does the average person do when they write down their goals and their New Year's resolutions? Doesn't reach them? What does the average marriage do? Well, the worst thing in the world that you want to be is average. So I'm not talking to a group of average people. So I'm going to talk to you the way I'd like somebody to talk to me. Okay? When my mom set that bottle down on my kitchen island, I saw juice. But let me tell you something. There's a lot more in that bottle. Though it's the most, I've been in and around nutrition my entire life. It's the most dramatic, the most versatile, the most consistent nutrition product I've ever seen. Sometimes it sounds too good to be true. But in that bottle is a beautiful view like Estella has. In that bottle is your home paid off free and clear. In that bottle is your children going to private school. In that bottle is a washer and dryer that don't shake down your hallway when you turn them on. In that bottle is new shoes for you ladies. Or a closet full in my mom's case. In that bottle is a trip for you and your family to anywhere you want to go in the world. The last several years, my mom has taken all of her grandchildren and her children to a beach home right on the water. You step out of the back porch, past the jacuzzi, right onto the water for a week. For a week. We do nothing. We go with no agenda, we go with no plan, but we be a family, and I get to remember what it's like to live with my mom and my sister. I get to meet my nephews like I never really got to meet them because she chose to believe, she chose to dream, she chose to live, she chose to listen, she chose to work. I heard somebody say recently, work hard now and play later, or play now and work hard later. This is such a young, ambitious group. I'm so intimidated by this group. You are so driven, so hungry. Man, you're going to have a long time to play if you keep working this hard. In that bottle is going to every single sports camp with your children that they want to go to and being one of the only parents there all day. In that bottle is mentorship from some of the greatest leadership that walks planet Earth. In that bottle is leadership of one of the best companies that's ever been around in the history of the world and the best in the history of our industry. In that bottle is your dreams, if you choose. Yeah, give yourself a round of applause. My mom brought me to an event just like this in May of 2003. It's been almost 10 years, Mom. 10 years. In that bottle is mentorship from your mommy. And the ability to travel different countries around the world and learn from the people you love. I met a couple, I think it was this morning, introduced this, not a couple, but I met a mother and a son. We took a picture right here. And a young man who I saw the fire in his eyes, and he was proud to introduce us. He was proud to introduce us to his mom and to get us a picture. And I saw a young man that was proud and aspired to have what my mom and I have accomplished in Zango. And I thought, man, I wouldn't miss that for the Super Bowl. One person. One person. A few years back, I went through one of the hardest times in my life where we had somebody lie to us, somebody we trusted, almost like a family member, steal from us. And everybody invested in the things that my wife and I were investing in because I understand the industry that it was in, and they wanted to invest what I was doing. And the one person went bad. He went bad, and he stole everything from the people that I love, the people who trust me, and from us. He stole everything that we had financially. But the residual nature of this business allowed us to keep our chins up and to move forward. But I called one of the greatest leaders I ever met in my life during that hard time. And I just thought, man, how can one person do so much bad? One person can impact so many people so negatively. See, I was looking at it wrong, and I called Aaron Garrity. And because Aaron comes with the bottle, he gave me some life lessons and some leadership information. He said, Tommy, but think about what one person can do to impact so many people positively. And then he started rattling off some of the greatest leaders in the world, in history, what one person can do. And I look at what Estelle has done, and I really see what one person can do. This is a country that's on fire. Man, you guys are amazing. Give yourselves another round of applause. I'm thinking of some defining moments in my life, and it was this event in May of 2003 in Las Vegas. And they did a portion that you guys have already seen a little bit of today. They did a recognition portion. And I went to this meeting kicking and screaming because I didn't think network marketing worked. I poked fun at it. I called it a pyramid. I said you got to get in early. Boy, I was 30 and broke, but I knew it all. You know, I had it all figured out. But I went because my mom followed the system that was put before her by her mentor and her sponsor. And I went because it was my mom and because I love her. And I went to protect her. But I sat in the aisle. I sat in the aisle row. And I think I might see some of you in here maybe kind of coming in with that posture. And I sat in the aisle because I didn't want to sit by any of these weirdos. I just wanted to sit by my mom. And then they did the recognition. And my first thought was, well, good for them. What does that mean to me? But then the recognition kept going. And there was more people, and more people, and more people, and more 20Ks, and more premieres, and more 100Ks. And they all crossed the stage, and they were all smiling, and some were dancing, and some were crying. They were all happy. They all had the energy that I lost. They all had the belief that I had let go of. They all had a dream that they weren't willing to let go of, and they had a vehicle. And that's the biggie right there, ladies and gentlemen. You have a vehicle with no limit. It is limitless. You have a vehicle with no glass ceiling now. You have something you've never had before. What are you going to do with it? Well, I watched all those people cross the stage. And then at the break, I went and I started talking with some of them, and I asked them questions. When my mom wasn't looking, of course, because I couldn't let her see that I was starting to show some interest. And I realized that they were just like me. See, success stories in Zango come in all shapes and sizes. Some were younger than I was. Some were more educated. Some were thinner. Some weren't. That was before Favale. Some had industry experience. Some didn't. Some had money already. Some didn't. But they were all living the life that I believed that I would help create for my family. They all chose to live. They all chose to listen. They all chose to discipline themselves. They all chose to be coachable. And I called my wife on the break and I said, honey, I'm going to come home from this event tomorrow, and together, we're going to build this business. And she said, what? What happened, honey? What changed? And I said, I can't justify that all these people that cross the stage, I can't justify that they can do something that I cannot do. If she can do it, you can do it. If he can do it, you can do it. So I went home and I started talking to people, just like I was taught to do. I called my mentor, my new mentor, somebody who had experience and had a track record of success and integrity, much like your leader. And I took notes. And then I disciplined myself. I picked up that 100-pound telephone. And I started making phone calls, and I started setting appointments. And I sat down with some of my friends. I sat down with my friends. And I remember what a few of them told me. I remember what Scott Truitt said to me. I remember how it made me feel when he told me I couldn't. I remember what Josh Cameron said to me when he laughed at me and said, don't be silly, you can't do that, you're a realtor. You're a realtor, you can't do network marketing. I remember when I went to my friend's nutrition store. I remember when I sat with him and I looked him in the eyes, and with all the belief I could muster up, I said, Brian Carey, I am going to build this business. I saw it done before. I'm going to do it now, and I want you to come with me. I remember how it made me feel when he laughed, and he said, you cannot do that, Tommy. You cannot do network marketing. He said, don't quit your day job, Tommy. Don't quit your day job. Your day job. Who wants a day job anyways? Now in hindsight, holy smokes. I should have ran right then. Don't quit your day job. He said, your family will suffer. I remember my family member, one of my family members pulled me aside and said, your family's going to suffer. My family's going to suffer. And I'm thankful for the 6 men and 1 woman, actually all the women too, but I think Beverly's just like a founder to me, who run this company, who told me I could. I thank Liz and Estella for believing in me enough to ask me to come here and didn't even give me a topic, for believing in me. Man, borrow other people's belief for a while. Sometimes you need to do that to create your story. Ten and a half years ago, I got a phone call. I was selling real estate for a large builder. I got a phone call at about 8 p.m., and it was from my cousin, Toby, who lived in Oklahoma with my dad. And my cousin Toby said, Tommy, it's really bad. It's really bad. I said, what's really bad, Toby? He said, your dad's not well. My hero is not well. I said, get your composure together. Tell me what happened. He said, I think your dad's going to die. He said he's in an ambulance right now. He had something very bad happen. And then they proceeded to drive him to a hospital that's 40 minutes away from his home. So he lived out in the country. And they picked him up. They took him to the hospital, and they said, we can't touch him. We don't have anybody here that can help him with what he has. So they flew a helicopter from another hospital and picked him up and took him to that other hospital. And miraculously, he lived through the transportation. And during that time, miraculously, he stayed alive. And I've always wondered since I was a little kid, if you have any say in life or death when you might be looking it in the eye. I always wondered if you're in that air vac helicopter, or if you're in that situation, but you can still think clearly, if you have any say in the decision-making process of whether you live or die. I've always wondered that. So I'm calling the airlines, trying to get a flight to Fort Smith, Arkansas, to Oklahoma City. I finally get a flight to Oklahoma City, praying that my dad is still alive when I get there, so I get a chance to talk to him. And I get to the hospital. I get to Oklahoma City, and then I have to get a ride for 2 hours to get to the hospital where he was at in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And I make it. My stepmom's there. My uncle's in the waiting room. All of my dad's friends are in the waiting room. My 12-year-old little sister's in the waiting room. And right before I go in to see my dad, who suffered a thoracic aneurysm, rupture on his aorta, the same thing that killed John Ritter in 8 hours. My stepmom warns me that he can't understand what I'm saying, that they had opened up his chest, took his heart out, froze his body, hooked his heart up to a bypass, did some work on it, put his heart back in, connected him up, got some baling wire, put his rib cage together, and his liver had shut down, his kidneys had shut down, that she just told me that I wouldn't recognize him, and that he wouldn't understand anything that I was saying because he was unconscious and because of the drugs and medication that he was on. So I prepared myself and I went in there, and there was some things on my mind. And I went in there, and my stepmom leaned down and went right in his face. Jerry! Jerry! And his eyes kind of rolled up in his head. And I thought, man, I probably wouldn't want to wake up to that either. Jerry! I'm kidding. I call her my bonus mom. I love her. And I said, and it's all that happened is his eyes rolled up in his head. Well, I went back out to the waiting room, and then I sat there and I pondered and I thought about some of the things that I wanted to talk to my dad about. And so I went back in there. I asked for permission to go into his room alone, and I went in there and I sat down right beside my dad. I just sat down and I just went, Dad. And immediately his eyes opened up. And he looked right at me, and he smiled. And I said, Dad, do you believe in God? He nodded, yes, and he smiled. I said, Dad, I believe in you. And I said, your family believes in you. And I said, my son, who was only 2 years old at the time, Jerry, needs you. He needs you in his life. And I said, Dad, and he nodded when I said that, and he smiled. And I said, you always taught Sis and I, my older sister, as we call her, Sis, you always taught us to fight, to never give up, to choose to live. And I said, I just want to know one thing. I want you to fight no matter what. Choose to live. And he raised up his hands and he made fists the best he could because his hands were swollen. And he made these fists and he shook his hands and he looked me right in the eye. And I said, are you telling me you're going to fight? Because that's what I wanted to know. If he had any say in it, I wanted him to lead by example, to practice what he always taught us, to not give up. Well, and if it was time for him to go, then so be it. Well, and then I asked him a few more questions, and he faded away. No more responses, no more smiling. His eyes stayed closed. And the next 23 days, every 48 hours, the doctors would come to my stepmom and I and say, Tommy, Dawn, you need to make a decision whether we wanted to pull the plug or not. Because one day he'd be a little bit better, the next day he would just develop an acute respiratory distress syndrome where his lungs would harden. The one day he would get a little bit better, then the next day his kidneys would shut down more. One day he'd get a little bit better in one area, but this area would get worse. And they said he went without blood and oxygen for so long that he'll definitely be brain dead if he lives. For 23 days, we went through that. On the 24th day, he got his own room upstairs, so he got out of intensive care. 23 days. And I sat there with my dad in his room when he was on his road to recovery. And I said, Dad, I've always wondered something. I've always wondered if you have any say in it, if you were in your situation. He said, so, you know, it's funny you say that, Tommy. He said, because I remember when I was in the ambulance and when I was in the helicopter, I remember thinking, things aren't good on the farm. I've had a good life. It would be easier to just give up. It'd be easier. And he said, I thought, this is my time. He said, but then something happened. He said, then you came into my room and you and I had a conversation and I decided to live. I chose to live. I chose to fight. You know, the chills that came throughout my body, he remembered that conversation. And he made a decision. And now he's my neighbor. He lives directly behind me, and he's my best friend. So I tell you, and you, and you, and you, and you, choose to live, and choose to live boldly and confidently and passionately and with energy, and move forward, and we'll see you on the stage next year. Thank you.
Sometimes I get a good feeling, yeah.